Good day to everyone who connected today to the live broadcast of our webinar, as well as to those who will watch it in the recording. My name is Evgeny Bajan. I'm the co-founder and the head of global project operations and startup relations at XD Capital. I express my gratitude to the administration of the Innopolis Special Economic Zone for providing such a great opportunity to cover the topic of impact investing and social entrepreneurship. My role for the next hour and a half will be moderation of our event. The theme of today's webinar is Impact Investment and Social Entrepreneurship. Today we have 3 speakers in our program. Thanks to all the participants who asked the questions in the Telegram channel of our event. Anyway, feel free to ask us anything during the webinar. So after each speech, we will take time to answer your questions. I will be the first speaker touching upon the topic of impact assessment for sustainable projects. After me, we will hear the speech of our special guest, Cole Hoover. Cole leads the Moving Worlds Social Services Institute, headquartered in Seattle, United States of America. He will talk about how to grow and scale socially oriented enterprises. And finally, Kevin Hender, co-founder of the Kazan Express, he is a resident of Innopolis Special Economic Zone, tell us about his experience how to inspire sellers to support a charity program. He will join us in just 15 minutes. I may start. My name is Evgeny Bajan. As I've already mentioned, I'm a head of global project operations at XD Capital. So XD Capital is an impact evangelist that connects businesses, innovations, and capital, and develops impact sector in Russia and the CIS region. There are 4 directions that we follow. Our first direction is that you may guess we co-invest in sustainable startups and match them with impact investors on a global scale. Our second direction is that we co-organize online social activities that are dedicated to the problems of impact investing. And our third direction is that we source projects globally for corporations. I may just get down to the presentation that I've just prepared for you. Just one moment. Okay, here we go. It's supposed to be here. Here it is. F5. So I would like to talk to you about why impact measurement makes a difference for sustainable projects. So we're gonna start from the basics. It's the Global Agenda 2030, but as I already was informed that many participants of our webinar, many viewers already orient quite well in SDGs. So I'll just briefly cover this topic. So in just the year of 2015, the SDGs were elaborated, and in the year of 2017, the resolution was adopted by the General Assembly that actually covers all 17 SDGs. So there is just a number of goals that one has to take into consideration. Is about SDGs. I might just generally express my thoughts about it. Is that we need to create a more sustainable society, a more sustainable economics and capitalism. These goals are like milestones that we have to follow, and everything is based upon the concept of sustainability. So what is in nutshell of sustainability? Sustainability is just focused on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So we talk about how to actually protect our environment we live in, how to increase our living conditions and work conditions, and to really improve the social welfare globally. And actually, we talk about the transition to carbon economy and to a low carbon economy. So in order to do that, about 200 countries signed the Paris Agreement in the year of 2016. If we won't take any actions, we know that the climate will just increase by at least 2%. But that's it seems like it's a low. There is that it's not a big difference for our environment, but if we take into account that the rate of natural calamities that occur on a global scale, we need to understand that even like countries like island countries, they may face with great difficulties. They may occur underwater, and it actually affects not only like island countries, but even all developed countries, because we are now in the era of globalization, more interconnected than previously. So there are several standards how one can calculate an impact. I would like to tell some basic why a sustainable startup needs to do that. Impact assessment isn't just was not created to make a life of startups more miserable. I know that according to statistics, 8 out of 10 projects they die. They do not withstand the competition. So the main aim for every startup should be just to survive. But today I will just tell you why sustainable projects and how a sustainable project can benefit from exposing their impact scores, from exposing their outcomes, exposing their daily activities that really contribute to achieving one or several of sustainable development goals. So yeah, just when we talk about what kind of startups might be classified as sustainable, it's we need to understand that like a lot of startups in industries are classified as sustainable, at least as they really contribute to achieving 17 SDGs. So there are several standards how one can calculate an impact. There is a set of IRIS indicators developed by Gene, and classification is built according to the industry, SDGs contribution, and financials. So I would say that this is one of the best classifications I've met so far for startups. And the next classification is the rating system for measuring global investment, GRRs, but it's more for funds. The third standard is ESG. For example, they're used for assessing, for measuring impact within big investment funds. There are like indexes as like Standard and Poor ESG index and others. So there is also a GRI standard, is global reporting initiative. It is used by corporations to provide public reporting. And there are many other standards that one can actually use. But for startups, I would just recommend to follow IRIS indicators. Okay. Yeah, and key terms for impact measurement. We need to understand who do you target, what is your client base, what exactly you do for them. You need to measure, you need to take into consideration quantitative indicators and qualitative outputs and outcomes. I would say that there is a difference because there might be, you might, for example, if we take, for example, McDonald's, it may produce 30 millions of hamburgers on a daily basis in the US. But what is the outcome of that? Do the people consume a healthy food? How they, what is the, would they make a life of their employees more easy? There are plenty of factors that we should take into consideration, and only sticking to a complex approach, we can really fathom what's the real social impact a company generates. So let's get to the next slide. So how does IRIS methodology look like? I just mentioned that that methodology is the best one for startups. So as you can see on their official website, there are several categories, like impact category. It's just a startup can find a sphere it operates in, and then just shift to SDGs that it would like to follow, where a startup would like to contribute to achieving a specific SDG. And there's also like dimensions of impact, as I've already also mentioned: what, who, how much scale, and how much depth. There are plenty of questions that need to be raised. And in order to calculate impact, it's good to conduct social surveys in the company to understand the real situation in a startup, how employees feel themselves, and what kind of product and service they produce, and what was the feedback, the client's feedback, and you know, there are plenty of aspects talking about calculating social impacts. So yeah, and another organization is B Impact Assessment. It designed a system that allows one to calculate impact scores according to dozens of indicators. Yeah, and as we see, there are pretty about everything. If we take into consideration governance, there is a corporate accountability, ethics, mission and engagement. If we take, for example, environment, we talk about inputs, land, yeah, and transportation. So, and by calculating those kind of social impacts, I would just briefly, okay, here we can. So yeah, just continuing the topic, I would like to also to mention that before really talking about why a startup needs to measure social impact, I would just say that it is useful to check up more than 150 targets connected with SDGs. So if you don't want to be accused in SDG washing, you need to understand exactly what kind of target you would like to reach in the short term and in the long term. So it's better to check up the website sdgcompass.org. And yeah, just a startup founder need to write down that it's good to demonstrate an outcome and not activities. Also, sometimes it might be quite useful to manage negative outcomes. For example, if an investor asks what kind of problem you have, and it's an impact investor, it might be also a good point just to underline some negative outcomes in order to in order to pass this point, to overcome these difficulties. Yeah, and it is also quite useful to cooperate with partners in your field. It might be a mass media, NGOs, distributors, customers, and others. You need to get as much feedback as possible. So yeah, this is the most important slide. Why does sustainable startup need to quantify impact? So there is a number of reasons why sustainable startup should measure its impact scores. And the number one reason, which is just single out, it's impact measurement is a part of PR and marketing strategy. So just exposing this data and tangible results, tangible outcomes achieved. So those kind of steps would grow your audience. And the new generation of consumers, they doesn't want to buy a common product. For example, more customers pay attention to the materials a product is made of, and to social conditions according to which this product was made of, and a number of factors. More importantly, institutional investors shift their focus and allocate funding for sustainable projects. It's I just tell it according to the latest statistics. Impact measurement and understanding the social impact created helps to catch the attention of institutional investors and impact investors. And moreover, some of impact investors could assist you not only in allocating their capital, but they might be ready to provide other resources like their connections, mentoring support, and expertise. That's extremely important because in plenty of cases, a startup doesn't need capital as much as an additional expertise, as connections, as finding a ways to grow their customer base. And public authorities nowadays tighten rules for social enterprise funding. So it means that from one perspective, there are more grants available for sustainable projects, but those governmental bodies or the one that are authorized to provide grants, they have to understand, they have to select the best projects, and how a governmental body could just select it in the best way is to get as much information as possible. So for a sustainable startup, is a good point to provide that kind of information, even if it's not really filtered, even if a team has some doubts. It's just we talk about exposing your social impact, so it shouldn't be it should be done like in any way. The final reason for a startup to quantify its own impact is that its employees can directly see how their efforts are really transferred to outcomes. They can see the consequences of their actions, and that's really what motivates, because there were plenty of studies carried out that showed that it's not only about money, it's also about creating something, making a world a better place. So for example, I've taken this example from a website. It is called like call for action, where more than hundreds of startups are presented that actually contribute to achieving one or several SDGs. For example, there is a company, Avalon Clean Energy. It was classified that it contributes to achieving the 7th SDG, affordable and clean energy. And what we can actually see is just a brief summary, but in this document we can actually see that the company reduces CO2 emissions, and it creates employment opportunities for thousands of people, and it will positively affect more customers in the short term. And this kind of information can be published in tier 1 business magazines like Forbes. So there might be an article issued with the headline like 4 environmental startups driving the circular economy, and this can actually grow your audience. So if you do something like that, if you're a social enterprise, if you're or like generally a sustainable project, so it's a good point just to show your outcomes. And yeah, the final slide is that we need also to understand that the global market of impact investing is growing in a rapid speed. At a rapid speed. So if in the year of 2019 it was estimated to be only $502 billion, so in the next year, so the next year, the projection for this year is supposed to be $715 billion of dollars. So we have a market, and that's the most important point. Like generally for every startup, there are 3 key points that we need to take into account. It's a team, a product, and market perspectives. Is whether a product, whether there will be a market fit for a startup. Thank you for your attention. I'll be glad to answer all questions. Sorry, just maybe the second time for me moderating such kind of webinars. Okay, so I'll be glad to shift to Q&A session shortly after Cole and Kevin. So now I think it's a turn of Cole Hoover. Yeah, Cole, you have the floor.
Cool. Thanks, Evgeny. Appreciate it. So sharing right now. Presentation good?
Oh, excellent.
Okay, cool. Hey, everyone. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for Innopolis and others for hosting this event. I wanted to spend some time speaking today about the work we do to support scaling social enterprises and a lot of the tools and education that we think it takes to scale organizations that get to that kind of level of impact that we can measure, like was discussed in the last presentation. So at Moving Worlds, the organization that I work with, our goal is to empower people and organizations working across all different sectors to scale world-changing ideas. So I'll talk about this a little bit more, but really for us, whether you're working in a business, small business, a corporation, a government, a nonprofit, there's an opportunity for social impact in all of them. And it's our belief that we need to find ways to actually work together across those sectors to achieve greater global impact. So the ways that we do that, the 3 main parts of Moving Worlds, and I'll introduce a new one we just launched at the end of the presentation, are 1, we run a fellowship. So we have a career development program where mid-career professionals from all over the world, we've had fellows from 33 different countries, they come and do a program to transition their careers into more social and environmental impact work. So they take their great skills and networks and apply that to making the world a better place and gaining the skills needed to do that. So it's kind of like going to an MBA program specifically for social impact. The second thing we do, which I'll talk much more about, is actual capacity building for social enterprises on the ground. Moving Worlds as an organization began as a platform for pairing professionals with skills and social enterprises that had capacity gaps or needs or projects that they had an expertise need for that they did not have in their team. And so we, in our work, spend a lot of time helping social enterprises at all different sizes to scale up their impact. And then finally, like Evgeny was saying, there's all different kinds of corporate social impact work. There's opportunities for corporations to have an impact, but we need to make sure that they're not doing this SDG washing like he was talking about. We need to ensure that the work that they're doing will still, keep their business viable, or else they're probably not going to participate in it. But it also needs to have integrity. It needs to be measured against things like the Sustainable Development Goals to ensure that it's not just a way of marketing. So we work with companies and we help them to ensure that their corporate social impact programs have integrity and are scaling and supporting the people who need it the most. So these are the three areas that at Moving Worlds we work in. And what I'm going to talk about more today is, for us, 9 steps, and I'll summarize them at the end, but leading up to it, I'll just talk a little bit about some of the things that we see that contribute to successful social enterprises, and kind of what are the steps for social entrepreneurship to actually lead to an impact, the kind of impact that you'd want to measure. So many of you have probably seen this quote, but an Albert Einstein quote that we cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And although this is a quote that's used a lot, I feel like right now, at this time in the world, it's never felt more true. We're seeing all these things transition. We're seeing needs to address inequality, climate change, degrading environment, all different kinds of issues, rethinking government. And I think we're at a moment where we're realizing that we can't just keep doing the same thing, but doing it more. We need to actually really reconsider what is possible. And so for us, we have a variety of tools that we think help people to think more systemically and think in more of a human-centered way as they're developing social enterprise solutions. So another thing I wanted to talk about is why we think definitions of social entrepreneurship or social enterprise matter so much. So there's lots of different definitions out there. One that we use in our institute is a social enterprise is an entity that uses market-based forces, so like business principles, to solve social and environmental challenges through the creation of sustainable revenue streams with the intention of positively influencing the larger systems and stakeholders around it. And so the reason that we do this is we don't say it needs to be a business. We don't say that it needs to be a specific kind of startup. It's just some kind of entity that uses business principles to scale social and environmental impact. And I'll talk about this more in the next slide, but why we think this is important is we want to welcome all the different sectors. If there's people working in government and they have opportunities to have an impact or design programs that could be sustainable and actually reach their constituents better, we'd like them to be open to doing that. If there's universities that could have a significant social impact, great as well. For us, it's really about having the social impact that can be measured and doing it in a way that's also financially sustainable. So the last piece I'd say is that, and this kind of goes back to the question around making sure that you're not designing programs in the same way you had before, is we believe that social enterprises, to be effective, need to also think about the systems that they're a part of. Think about the larger effects, think about the consequences of their actions, and not just focus on their very narrow way of being. So to talk a little bit more about kind of why we think that cross-sector approaches are so necessary, is that what we've seen over the past couple years, and really it's been a trend in the past couple decades, is this move towards a middle of social entrepreneurship. And this has happened across a variety, pardon me, slide going forward, a variety of sectors. So we've seen business being asked to be more ethical, to pay fair taxes, to invest in sustainability, to partner with governments, partner with nonprofits, to move more towards this place of social entrepreneurship. We've seen nonprofits, NGOs, international development organizations being asked to be more financially sustainable, being asked to be more accountable. We no longer just want them to take donation money and then who knows what's going to happen with it. We want them to be able to report. Just like Jenny was saying, like we want data. We want impact measurement as a way to better understand what we're getting out of it. And then finally, we're seeing governments all across the world who their role is changing, and governments aren't able to provide the kind of services that we think are meaningful to give people a good life. And so we're seeing NGOs be welcomed into the conversation of how can they fill gaps where government is not showing up. And then finally, so the government in many different countries, and I know that this is different country by country, governments are being asked to be more efficient. They're being asked to find ways to use business principles to scale ideas. And they're also being asked to partner with business and nonprofits in a way that's actually ethical, in a way that represents the citizens of that country. And so we really see that, from this ask to meet in the middle and for all three of the sectors to take on more of the social entrepreneurship mindset, is that what we're getting is more of a social impact ecosystem. So we use the term social entrepreneurship or social enterprise to talk about the specific small startups or organizations that are working in the field. And we use social impact to talk about the larger ecosystem that could be government, it could be NGO, it could be corporations. And I think that many people on this call, whether you're an investor or a founder of a startup, you're probably working mostly in the private sector in the social entrepreneurship space, but I guarantee that there's partnerships with governments, partnerships with NGOs. And so really this is an ask to try to find ways to work with these different sectors and also to further education that will have everyone working more like a social enterprise in the future. And what we think happens and what we think is possible when you have more kind of organizations meeting in the middle, practicing social enterprise principles, is that you've got philanthropists who will actually invest in outcomes once they can be measured. So if we want to bring more philanthropy into the social impact space, just like Evgeny was saying, we need data. We need impact measurements we can agree on. And so if we embrace the social entrepreneurship mindset that has this data-driven approach, we'll get more philanthropic capital. Impact investors, again, if they see this data, if they see organizations that maybe in the past would be an NGO that did not have the same kind of accountability, the same kind of efficiency, the same kind of business principles, once social enterprises scale up using these principles and using this data, we find that more impact investors are willing to fund the scale of them because there's more that can be demonstrated and expected and measured. So I talked about this a moment before, but also, NGOs, nonprofits, wherever they are, if they start using these kind of business principles, it allows them to optimize their programs for the people that they would like to help. And it allows them to reach more people because there's sustainable revenue streams and there's an ability to be a part of larger conversations. A program that we just launched involves partnering small social enterprises in the global south with corporations trying to work on sustainable supply chains. And we found that, for corporations to be able to be involved, they need a certain level of scale. They need a certain level of data and processes. And so that's another reason why taking some of these traditional NGOs and helping them to scale up with more kind of foundations of business can be really helpful. And then finally, and again, this is different in many different countries, but we find that if government starts to think more like a social impact organization, politicians start to invest in social programs, safety systems that align with social impact goals, and they're incentivized to do this because people vote for them, and they want to be reelected. And so if they start investing in things that actually work and not just things that are either going to lead to more money in their pockets or all different kinds of bad outcomes, we find that politicians will be incentivized to actually work within the social impact ecosystem as well. And so for us, the question really is, if we're going to scale up social impact in all of these different sectors, what does it take to actually invest in these social enterprises and the leaders behind them? And that's a lot of the work that we do. And we're honored to be on the call with other organizations like Innopolis and others who are investing in the individuals who will be leading the social impact organizations, because we need different kind of leaders now than we had before. And so really, one of the things that we've invested in the most is addressing a specific type of social enterprise. And so this is a diagram that many of you in the traditional startup space or the investment space have probably seen. It's traditionally called the startup valley of death, and something that comes up a lot. So the idea is that at the beginning, there's a new idea, teams coming together. It's really easy to raise investment. Everyone's excited. And also there haven't been results which were either good or bad. So there's no bad results to discourage, and there's no good results yet. So it's really easy for organizations typically to raise on an idea. Maybe they're not ready to grow yet, but they're able to kind of get the grants, the accelerator programs to get going. What we find is, and where we work a lot, is that what we call the pioneer gap. And the pioneer gap is once you've moved on from this really like exciting stage where you've raised a little bit of money, it's extremely hard to get from here all the way to here. So although there's a lot of different programs who work here at the very beginning stage when it's exciting, they're accelerating ideas, and we find a lot of impact investors come in right when an idea is ready to scale, that there's a huge amount of amazing human-centered organizations sitting in this gap where they're still working on how do you get product market fit? How do you test your initial market? How do you move through different pivots in your funding model? Maybe the first thing didn't work. How could you try new things? And then finally, like getting real product market fit before scale. So for us, so many of the best and most community-centered social enterprises are stuck here. And they're stuck here because many times the people leading them are members of those communities. They're parts of these communities that are experiencing social and environmental issues. They may not have access to the same resources or funding or networks as people who would really easily access impact investment over here. So for us, if we're going to design programs that actually address climate change, inequality, gender issues, we need to be investing in people who are actually at the front line experiencing those problems. But we also need to get honest that often, because these people don't come from money, they don't come from these great networks, they need a little bit more support to get there. And that's a lot of the work that we do. So at the end of the day, Moving Worlds, we try to support people, initiatives, and organizations that get stuck in this pioneer gap. And we think that these are some of the, again, organizations that have the greatest potential to solve local problems, create jobs, and actually grow to create meaningful social and environmental impact. And just to break it down, so I'd said 9 steps to having a proven social enterprise. This is one of the things that we see all the time, is that most social impact startups, they fall wildly short of their projections and they end up going out of business. Jenny talked about this as well, and I'm sure we'll talk about this some more. And the reason that we find that this happens is many startups fail because the founders think they have an idea that will work, when in reality, there's no market for it. So in this pioneer gap, this valley of death that I talked about, some of that is based off of inequality. Some of that is based off of these founders not having access to the right type of impact investment. But a lot of it is things that they could solve on their own as well. And it's about not having the right product market fit. And so one of the things that we recommend, and one of the tools that we teach in our institute and in our corporate programs and in our social impact accelerators, is the principle of human-centered design, which I'm guessing many of you have heard of. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we use it in our programs. And so one, we start with the value, the belief of human-centered design. And these core beliefs are the foundation to everything that we teach in terms of how to use the tools and how to create a business plan. And the 2 important things is, one, that we can solve all problems. Like there's all these ideas that seemed impossible before they happened, whether it was women getting the right to vote, or people solving the hole in the ozone layer, inequality, addressing poverty. For the longest time, we had this belief that these things were impossible. And usually the reason was the people in power told people who did not have power that they were impossible. But as we've seen, we can make change. We just have to believe that it is possible and that we can start working towards it. And then the second piece we find to be even more important. And that's the idea that the solutions to the world's greatest problems, they often live with the people experiencing them. And that's not saying that people in extremely under-resourced environments, that they have all the tools or that maybe they have the education to do it, but they do have the perspective, they do have the knowledge. And so for us, we think it's important anytime that you're trying to solve a problem, make sure that someone on the team is from the area, from the group experiencing the problem, or that you're using a human-centered design perspective to actually interview people, bring them to the table, make sure that what you're designing for them is actually going to be something they want. So many people get stuck in this startup valley of death, this pioneer gap, because they're outsiders who come in with the best idea, best education, best funding, and their ideas die because they never actually tested them. They never actually talked to local people. And so this is something that's available online. This is IDEO's diagram. Many of you have probably gotten a chance to see it. But for us, in all of our programs, we try to use this perspective, use this phase. How do you come up with a bunch of ideas? How do you pursue inspiration? How do you then start to find patterns of what's working and then test it? Like actually getting out there and testing it. So many ideas. People go out, bring an idea to market, invest a ton of money without ever testing the idea, and a bunch of money gets wasted and a bunch of impact gets missed as well. So what we do in our design thinking programs is we'll take the phases of human-centered design, which I just showed you, and those human-centered design beliefs, and we combine it with these principles from Stanford. So Stanford, school based in the US, that does design thinking. These are design thinking methodologies that have been used to build all kinds of businesses and products over the years. For us, we find that combining them, so taking design thinking, human-centered design, we have come up with social enterprise thinking, which is something that takes the best of design and business principles, combines it with human-centered design, which is really about the values and is really about centering those who actually experience the problems, and finding a approach that will allow social enterprises to make it through that pioneer gap. And I can just a little bit more for those not familiar. So in design thinking, it's about first learning about your audience, going out, connecting with people, hearing their perspectives, doing research with the actual people whose problem you're trying to solve. Second, it's about defining the right problem. So many organizations build an organization, build an enterprise that's actually trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, or a problem that is not going to be impactful. This happens again and again. We see it all the time. So using these tools to make sure you're asking the right question, and doing that before you get to the brainstorm. So many organizations start with brainstorming. They come up with a bunch of great ideas, but they don't interview the people, and they don't make sure they're asking the right question before they do it. And so the ideas they have are not as powerful. And then finally, the next stage that we find to be really important is prototyping. So instead of building something that's expensive, building something that's going to use a bunch of relationships and all different kinds of things, how can you create a prototype that people will give you feedback on, that you can go back and change and evolve and grow to actually meet the needs of the people that you are trying to serve? So again, this is social enterprise thinking. We use it in all of our different programs. It's a key part of the educational programs that we have in corporations, in the fellowship, and also in accelerators. And we find that it really does a lot to help people address the many issues that come up in that pioneer gap that keep social enterprises from scaling in meaningful ways. So to talk a little bit more, so we again, the ways that we do our work and the ways that we try to scale impact out in the world is we've helped close to 1,000 social enterprises to scale by providing them with pro bono consultants, which we call expertise from corporations and other places. We provide educational programming, so both to train the pro bono consultants and the people who are working within social enterprises, but also for anyone trying to get into the field of social impact. We do a lot of research for anyone who's interested in learning about lots of different social impact trends. We publish our work in Stanford Social Innovation Review and Harvard Business Review, and also on our blog. It's just the Moving Worlds blog. It's got lots of free content. We do webinars all the time for anyone interested in learning about human-centered design or system mapping, impact investment. And then finally, we do capacity building programs within companies to help corporate employees to be more impactful. Like, we believe that if we're going to address this pioneer gap and get more human-centered social enterprises to scale, it's going to take government, it's going to take corporations, it's going to take universities, it's going to take NGOs. We're going to need all of them partnering together and speaking some of the same language. Like the language of social impact is something that we need to make sure that is understood in all of those different sectors. So to summarize, so some of the things that I covered is one, that we believe to get through the pioneer gap and create something that's actually a meaningful social impact, you need to understand your ecosystem. We use tools like system mapping to see who are all the people, how does power flow through a system, how do resources flow, what are opportunities to have an impact that are actually tied to a whole picture. One example from early on in my work, I ran a microfinance organization in Ghana, West Africa, and we'd spent years investing in loans for women to grow more tomatoes. And everything was going great. One year though, the tomato crop was really, really big, and it meant tomato prices fell. And so the tomato farmers were affected by this because they did not have a way to actually negotiate the prices. They were in a vulnerable position. It led to a lot of issues for these farmers, and it also led to us realizing we need to invest in a bigger system. So we went from mapping the system out and realizing that we not only needed to give money to tomato farmers, but we needed to invest much larger amounts in tomato factories, so places that could actually jar and preserve the tomatoes. And then the tomato factory could sell it to local schools. Like, having these ecosystems is one of the things that creates more sustainable social enterprises. And without that understanding, we would not have been able to do the work we did. Second, and as I've talked about, using design thinking to find a product that can actually scale and that's going to resonate with the people that you are working with. Third is validating your scale-up business model. So we use tools like business model generation. There's a book called Business Model Generation that has the business model canvas that some of you may enjoy, many of you probably use, but it gives you a full picture of what it actually looks like to scale your organization. When you're ready and when you actually have something that has been prototyped and you've gotten feedback on, raising impact investment capital, Jenny and others have a lot of experience there, so we can save some of that for the Q&A. We also have a ton of resources on kind of when it makes sense to raise impact investment versus when it doesn't. And five is something that I think that we don't think about that often, is that to have a really great external impact, many times you need to spend more time internally, understanding the people in your team, why they do this work that matters, why they care, what are their skills, what are their strengths, and how do you get them to a point where they're part of a team that's really, really making a solid contribution. Managing your team, we have other pieces on how to manage effectively the growth of your social enterprise and the people within it. How to move from that space of startup where everyone's doing everything to actually delegating and being more efficient like a growing business. And seven, we've talked about it a lot, but again, it's really our belief that partnerships, if we're going to reach things like the Sustainable Development Goals, we need partnerships across businesses, across sectors, across other places. Cross-sector collaboration and building trust and building partnerships, we find being one of the most important things that you can invest in. So no matter what part of the world you're working in, what type of organization you have, be partnership-minded. Find ways to collaborate. Find ways to do things that others can't do well, but also to step back and let others take the lead on things that they excel at. Back to Jenny's point, so report on impact. We also have some articles on when it makes sense to measure impact. Smaller organizations can measure impact very differently than large ones. Sometimes it's just stories or numbers of people served, very different metrics like using the GIN or B-impact, which is a lot more data-driven, a lot more rigorous. So just being aware of what kind of impact you're going to measure at the right time. And then finally, if we're doing things that are not helping to shape and shift the larger industries around us, if we're not doing things that are going to inspire change, it goes right back to the Albert Einstein quote at the beginning. If we're using the same thinking we've had that created all these problems, we're just going to perpetuate. We're going to keep the problems going. So we need to create a thinking that is going to allow us a new way of pushing the industry. And so my final slide here, just wanted to also announce, I know we've got people on the call who spend a lot of time investing in social enterprises. We've just launched a new program partnership with SAP to actually help scale social enterprises who work in sustainable supply chains all over the world. So groups that are in that pioneer gap, who are trying to make manufacturing more sustainable, energy more sustainable, all different kinds of areas. We have now an accelerator program with education to allow them to better orient towards selling to corporates and other types of organizations to grow the sustainable supply chain globally. So if anyone's interested in chatting about anything on the presentation or that, You can reach me here by email or also on Twitter. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Cole, for this wonderful presentation. I totally agree with practically all ideas covered here. They're just quite simple, but at the same time insightful and helpful for startups and might really change their course of actions in the short term and in the long term, in the long run, because they need to be like, it's that simple advice is just to be aware of what is going on around you and share with everything you do, because it's really important. So right now we move to our next guest. It's Kevin Kenda. That would he would share more details on his project and also how he managed to inspire sellers or to sellers to give more money for charity. So Kevin, you have the floor.
Yeah, hello Eugenie, hello everyone. So I'm going to briefly talk to you about our own project, what are we doing, and how do we inspire other people, our entrepreneurs, to invest in charity, so to make charity at all. Well, our startup is called Kazan Express, and it is a marketplace platform where we connect our buyers with our sellers. So we have on one side we have customers which want the fastest delivery, which want the best prices, and on the second part we have sellers, we have entrepreneurs, which are willing to sell their goods and receive some profit from it. So this is basically like the Amazon model or like the AliExpress model or the similar products which appear in all of the countries all over the world, and Russia is not an exception. So we have different products like Ozon, like Wildberries, and they're all similar a bit, but our main advantage is that we deliver goods to our customers within 1 day. So you make an order, you offer some good for you today, and you receive it for delivery points or by delivery points. So now I'm going to talk about what our project with this charity was. The virus appeared in Russia, and we all, I mean, that every part of the every citizen of Russia should go to stay self-isolate and not to go outside. And this is mostly harmful to old people, which usually go to the shops, and they are also in the risk group, so they are the most vulnerable people for this virus. We have decided that we, as a company which can deliver goods in 1 day, that we should make some charity project which was called Stop Corona. And the main goal was to gather people, gather different entrepreneurs to invest. So, but not to invest, but invest to charity. So we have invited different people from different spheres. We have invited the companies like Tatneft or companies like Akbarsbank, which are the biggest oil production in Russia and one of the biggest banks in Russia. So they were interested in participating in our project. And we also inspired sellers which were presented on our marketplace to also share some part of their profits for these people. So for the old people, our goal was to collect money in order to bring old people all of the goods which they will need for the quarantine time. I mean that it was the standard shopping cart for a customer. So there were milk, bread, some vegetables, noodles, and other stuff which people eat in Russia every day. So and we were able to collect a toll about 10,000 such shopping carts. Yeah, so that's what we are doing. And the main point here is that while you're doing something like a charity program, when you're participating in it by itself, like a company or like a normal person, I mean like a regular person, it is always good to inspire other people and bring other people to take part with you, because when you collect as much people as we do, we have a big community. We have a lot of people which are willing to share something, which we are willing to help, but they do not usually know what to do or where their money will go or whom should they help first. And this is the vector where you can direct them. So you can explain about what are you doing, why are you doing, what is the goal of your activity. For example, our goal was to keep old people, keep people which are older than 65 and 60 years at home, so that they won't go anywhere, they won't go to the shops, they won't go to the pharmacy, because we bring everything which they need to them. And first of all, we decided to help people which have low profit, so which have poor families, which have low income. We also asked our city and different cities of Russia to help us to detect such people. So every city has a list of people which need some help, which are in need of help, which are maybe defected someone. Somehow, I mean that, for example, they are blind people, people which are I don't know, maybe, and we people first in a way we can. Yeah.
So thank you, Kevin. Now we move to Q&A session. But I would just like to raise a specific question to Kevin, because he just, it was a great example of how even social enterprise can contribute to achieving SDGs. Kevin managed to define its group of people that he wanted to target. It was elderly people. He provided them groceries, pills, everything to tackle with COVID-19. So I would like just to raise a question to Kevin. So how many people, I mean like approximately, if you didn't calculate, but in your point of view, how many people did you manage to help in this current situation?
I know the exact number. So we have gathered about 10,352 shopping carts, and we delivered them for free to the people which were in most need.
Yeah, that sounds terrific in my point of view. That's a great example. So, okay, guys, now we move to Q&A session. We got some questions from our YouTube chat. So, yeah, I've noticed a question from Albina Lebedeva. Can you tell about an example of successful investment in impact enterprise in Russia this or last year? So I would just definitely underline some industries where impact investments are on the rise. So there are like two industries. One of them is EdTech and another one is MedTech. Among EdTech, you perhaps all heard about Skyeng. Bering Vostok managed to invest millions of dollars in Skyeng, but that example was really great. A person didn't want to just didn't want to go to a specific language school because he wasn't satisfied with the end result, because he thought that he noticed that the educational system was imperfect. So he noticed that some major differences might be introduced. So he decided just to launch his own startup. And then another example is in the medtech industry. I would just tell that it's Motorica. It's the company that produces prostheses for children. And as far as I know, they do a really great job nowadays. And so, yeah, like two industries that I would definitely recommend to look at, EdTech and MedTech. So the next question that we got in our chat is from Bulat Khalif. Do you think that impact investment is a positive impact in the first place, or investment with a particular focus instead? I would just answer that, you know, all kinds of investments that are focused on doing something. But, you know, when we talk about impact investments, they're mainly targeted on achieving, on generating the social value, how to really improve our social welfare, how to achieve a necessary, how to tackle problems of social justice, and make the world a better place. So when we talk about arms industry or a lot of industries that just produce this pollutions for our environment, so those are not kind of industries that an impact investor would usually invest in. And yeah, that's I guess the answer. Our third question is from Alina Schenfeld. It is addressed to Cole. So yeah, she has just written down. It's a great presentation. Thanks. I've got a question. What challenges do your clients, companies, corporations have in financing and supporting social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, great question. I think that it's two things. So one, we found, like I'd mentioned, we're launching this new program to accelerate sustainable supply chain organizations. And the thing that we consistently hear with companies is they love a social enterprise, but the social enterprise is not to the level of scale that they could actually purchase anything from them. So there's these huge gaps. And so what we're finding is either helping to get social enterprises to a level of scale and at a point where they understand how corporate supply chains and corporate purchasing programs work, to kind of translate that language to them is helpful. Second is, can you help smaller social enterprises become part of larger associations so they could actually negotiate and sell as a group to get to those scale requirements that companies may have. And then the final thing is, I think companies have a really hard time doing new things many times. Like, they may innovate in certain ways, and some companies are much more innovative than others. But we find that people with really awesome social enterprise ideas, they often need support to get their ideas further in a company, because many times companies aren't measuring, like they don't, it's not part of their bottom line, and so they're not prioritizing social impact. So we find that helping people to navigate all the challenges within their corporation and find the right people who could be champions for them to actually get a social enterprise idea going is important. So on the inside, it's educating corporate employees to advocate for social enterprise ideas. And then on the outside, it's finding ways to help social enterprises learn to speak the language of the company, to scale their programs to get to the level that they could actually sell, or to join larger groups that would allow their group scale to be meaningful. That's at least some of the things that we've seen.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So I have also one question to you, Cole. I would just interested to know what kind of sophisticated technical solutions you use while working with startups in terms of providing necessary assistance to them.
Yeah, good question. As an organization, we mostly focus on the consulting and the education. So we run online learning communities with, weekly webinars and workshops, and we use a lot of tools like Mural or Miro to map out business plans and give people a way to virtually look at their system map. As far as other technical tools, we, like Evgeny was talking about, we use a lot of those impact measurement ones that he mentioned. Those are fantastic, and I wouldn't recommend anything differently. Those are perfect. And then the other technical support is very personalized. So we'll have companies or social impact consultants who will go and work with those organizations, and it could be around their communication strategy, it could be their accounting and finance strategy. We'll pair people with expertise with organizations that have that specific need. So it's very case by case. Yeah.
So is it similar to what actually impact venture accelerators do when they provide a mentorship assistance?
Yeah, it's a great question. We do provide some coaching and some mentorship. It really depends. It's like coaching, mentorship, education related to selling into corporations for that accelerator. On the other side, when it's just individuals who are trying to transition their careers, we do a lot of very like individualized personal coaching and mentorship.
Mm-hmm. So you would like. So you state that corporations, like big corporations, now are more interested in sustainable solutions. So that's the reason they cooperate with social enterprises, because they're really interested in growing this their ecosystem of their own products, but at the same time supporting social enterprises and helping them to as a distribution channel, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And Evgeny, I think you brought up a great point too. It's like sometimes it's honest and they really want to invest, but they don't know how. Sometimes it's kind of like SDG washing, and they just want to be seen as being associated with social enterprises. And so I think it's about pushing companies to really have more integrity around what they're doing and what they're investing in, and all of us who are in this work mentioning times where the impact is not actually sustainable, like making sure that we're speaking about this publicly.
So just maybe that's a tricky question. So did you witness some cases when of corporates that were engaged in this greenwashing, and you decided just to reject a cooperation with them?
Yeah, is it the question for me?
Yeah, it's a question for you, Carl. Sorry.
Yeah, we definitely have. We have rejected some. We've also found others in the past where maybe they started in one place, and through working with us, they learned ways to be more sustainable. Like I think that sometimes we could start a project and a program is not as impactful as it could be, and will help companies to get there. Like we don't need to be working with only companies that have everything figured out or have the perfect impact thesis. We'd much rather work with some who are developing, as long as they're honest and they're willing to actually grow and learn. Like the other example you'd said, where if it's just kind of SDG washing and that's all they want to do, like I think that they should get in touch with an advertising firm or a PR firm. Like that seems like what they're looking for, not what we do.
Yeah, that's great. So the next question is addressed to Kevin. Kevin, I wonder whether you use the method of surveying, of conducting surveys, social surveys, while gathering your data, or is was data from a platform that operates?
You mean the survey for the people to which we bring our shopping cart?
Yeah. I mean, people for, surveys for those kind of people, and perhaps survey for entrepreneurs that allocated funds for charity.
Yeah. So we made some kind of survey. So we made a two-sided survey. So the first survey was for the entrepreneurs, for our sellers on our platform, in order for them to ask if they are ready to participate, and with a small kind of explanation. So what are we doing? Why are we doing? What is our purpose? So that everything which we have done and for what we have done, we explained to them, after which we asked for what is the part of your profit which you're going to share with the people who are needed in it. And also we made a second part of survey, which was directed to the people which were in need. So in order to define the most needed people, because when you're doing something like a charity, you want to help to everything, to everyone, but it is not possible at all, because it is not, you are not able to collect such amount of money, such amount of investors and people which will share your interest in it. So we want to choose such people which are really in most need. That's why we conducted some surveys to answer this question.
Mm-hmm. So I have also another question to all participants. So in your point of view, what's the major barrier for impact investors to scale their own business? What is the main drawback for them? What really impedes them from reaching success? Is it like their mindset, governmental limitations? It's the undeveloped. Is that the market is rather undeveloped, or what's the main point here? Yeah.
Great
Anybody?
question. I feel like you must have a great perspective on that. Do you want to start?
So yeah, I can answer. Is that according to my point of view, is that actually we don't have borders. What the world that was 20 years ago is quite different than it is nowadays. We are more interconnected as more as before, like never, because here we have a great opportunity to participate in a conversation, to discuss such kind of topic, and it was impossible maybe like 20 years ago. So a person has an opportunity to learn language, to learn a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff is just provided on a pro bono basis. If you need something, just go to Coursera and learn it. So I think in terms of starting your own business, in terms of shaping your idea, there are really a lot of incentives. And I think the main part is just a mindset. Mindset for entrepreneur is whether he really, it's like it's his natural desire to start his own or her own business. It's because when he do it in just reluctantly, so he gets a negative feedback. There are plenty of barriers that he is not willing to really overcome. But it's like when when there are thousands of barriers and you do it like a robot, but for every young entrepreneur, I mean, for an entrepreneur that have maybe not enough experience, that's our reality. Is that when we start to accept the world we live in, is that then really deep changes turn up. So that's my answer. So Cole, what's your point of view on that?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. You know, what I've seen from working with different impact investors and seeing social enterprises raising money is that one of the things, Jenny, like you said, the world has changed a lot. And I think that although impact investing is growing in all these ways and is innovative in all these ways, I think that we also, everyone defines it differently in a lot of ways. I mean, that's why your presentation on impact measurement, I think, is so important, because we need to be able to talk about the same thing. But I mean, I've seen impact investment mean everything from, funding solar panels to funding women's education and right to vote to job creation. Like, there's a lot of places where if you're in a country that has a very low GDP, they would call job creation, even if it's not in a sustainable business, social impact. Like, so we've got a lot of different definitions. And I think that allows some impact investors to not invest in the most impactful thing, because we have such a broad definition of what is impact that they can kind of get away with impact that's a little bit more like SDG washing. And so I think that it's important to have better definitions. I do also think that there's a lot of ways to have an impact, so we don't want to get too restrictive. But finally, the biggest thing, and I've experienced this when I've been raising money, and I've seen this with others, is maybe the worst part of old ways of economic thinking, of old capitalist mindsets that I think still exists in impact investing, is that impact investors are not ready to be patient. They're not ready to deploy patient capital, when a lot of the times these social enterprises are extremely complicated. Like the issues that Kevin and his group are investing in, like those are issues that are going to take years and years to solve. And that's an amazing way of helping people right now during COVID. But like to invest in an entrepreneur like Kevin over years is going to have a way better results than just investing and saying we need our money back in a year. Like we need to think actually at the scale of the problems, and we need to match our investment to that. And maybe that means bringing in philanthropic capital. We've seen a lot of great examples where foundations will put up the first money that would be the first loss, and impact investors are a little bit more protected. But whatever it takes, I think impact investment needs to think more on the far off time horizon than just like quarterly earnings like we've thought of in capitalism for so long.
Yeah, that's a terrific point. Yeah, I just totally agree with that. Is that, there are thousands of foundations. I know that there is actually a different attitude to impact investing in Europe and the US that we witnessed. And it's kind of weird because, even 25 years ago, I met people that just mentioned that 25 years ago, nobody actually talked about impact investment seriously in Europe. But then it was just, they just reached this level of social awareness about their problems, and then it just struck them. So now I see that, the similar tendency we witness in the US, and there are like thousands of foundations, thousands of family offices, VC funds that can actually deploy trillions of dollars, for example, pension funds, but they're actually restricted with their current guidelines, and they cannot break the law just. But yeah, that's the kind of challenges that we need to overcome. But I think, yeah, I totally agree that, investors should be more patient. So it's not about money, whether you will make like 500 or 1,000% profit from when your indicator of return of investments will be just, like staggering. And it's just about, I think, really perceiving the core essence of it is just seeing, like how people smile. What kind of, how did you manage to preserve the nature, for example, and just, spreading a word about it. I totally agree with Kevin. He just mentioned that we need just to spark more people on such courageous actions. So Kevin, what is your point of view? Would you like to add something in that connection?
Maybe I'd like to add something like that. Big corporates are also making some kind of impact investments in order also to gather profit from it. Like, for example, creating the new jobs. It is a good example on when the COVID situation happened. So many companies which are similar to mine, so such like Amazon, such like Wildberries in Russia, they created new jobs, new spaces for people to work, because many of them lost their jobs and they have nothing to do except that they should find another one. And if it's not possible, that they will starve and all of their families will starve. So sometimes such companies are making this not in order to gain profit, but also to give people jobs, even if it's not profitable for them. So, for example, when you have a lot of workers, it is not a good how to say, it's not very good when you do not have a work for them all, but you're just hiring them in order to help your country, your city or the people that are around you. So just that. It's a good example which I would like to mention.
Yeah, perfect. So I think we don't have like more questions in our chat. So yeah, we could actually continue our dialogue and discuss more details. So there are definitely more topics I would like also to cover. But I think we're good for today, and I would like to express my gratitude to Innopolis, an organizer that managed to gather all us today. And I would like to thank everybody for this wonderful conversation. Hope we'll manage to organize more online activities. And my special thanks to Cole Hoover, because your expertise and your opinion from abroad, from the US is really important, just to see how it is going on, not only in Russia but in the US. What kind of practices can we adopt, and how we actually can work together. Even I think because a lot of organizations they work on a global scale. So thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
And yeah, so have a great evening, and bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.